Welcome to the Renaissance Woodworker. I'm Shannon Rogers, your host. This is my shop update for March 31st, 2017. I'm going to be going live next week. It's that time of month, the first Thursday of every month. This shop update becomes a live shop update. We're going to be talking about edge planing, specifically some tips and tricks to allow you to get square edges on your boards. Now, just a precursor way in advance here, but the May live update, again, the first Thursday in May, I'm not positive yet, but I should be going live from the lumber yard. I get a lot of people telling me they have questions about lumber. They want to see me shoot more from the lumber yard and talk more about lumber. So why not go live and just take your questions? Any questions you have about shopping for lumber, buying lumber, selecting lumber, wood species in general, now is the time. So again, that's going to be the first Thursday in May. It's a long time from now, but I just wanted to get it out there so people start thinking about it and start hitting me with questions. This week, though, I'm actually stealing a question from the WoodTalk archives. Not really stealing it, I'm expounding upon it. In this week's WoodTalk, I took a question from Rob about cutting small dados into small pieces and making a grid and a tee box. We didn't really talk about how I would execute it, though, and that was part of his question. So I'm going to expound upon that and show you how I would execute small dados in two different methods. So I've just grabbed some of the thin scrap that I have lying around from the last time I was doing a project that had small dividers. This bit of poplar is, I guess, probably about a 1/4 inch. Yeah, it's about a 1/4 inch thick. It's a bit of cherry that is about 1/8 of an inch thick. So what I want to do is dado this cherry into this poplar. I've actually laid out a dado on here. Just grabbed my square and used a knife to square it across. Keeping the square in place, I brought the mating piece up to it. It's essentially just dropped my knife in place, brought the square over and squared that across. Now the key is I've gone really deep on here. And you could start with kind of a light cut. You always want to start with that light cut just to get it established. And then about maybe the second or third one, I'll really start to dig in. I want to go deep here. Really cut in here. The reason I want to go deep here is because normally when I would cut a dado, I would saw out the two sides, the two extents, the two vertical walls, chop out the waist in the middle, and then follow up with a router plane just to refine the bottom. But there's really no way I'm going to saw here. I'm going to make this dado a 1/16 of an inch. I've got my gauge set for a 1/16. I'm going to go ahead and mark lines on both faces. Now you notice I've also transferred my marking lines all the way around to the other face. I'm going to use this different technique on this face, but I want to make sure that everything lines up. So when I bring the two pieces to bear, they're straight across from one another. But first, let me grab the chisel. And I want to just make relief cuts down to the bottom of those knife lines. And that actually, I got lucky. That actually took me down to my 1/16 depth. So again, you can see why I want to make a nice deep knife cut. Marking knife may do that, it may not. You might need to grab like a pocket knife or something to really get down that deep. Now I've removed pretty much the bulk of the waist. If you have a chisel that's narrow enough, this is an 1/8 inch chisel, I can just come into the middle here. I'm working bevel down. Just pop that little mountain in the middle out. Now is where my router plane comes in. Now if you're doing this type of work, you're going to need a router plane with a narrow enough blade. This is, I think, a 3/16 inch blade. I just adjust it with the mallet like that. If your knife lines went all the way to the bottom, you can just work to completion. Let's test this fit. And there we go. That is a pretty good fit. Slide this back so you can see it a little bit better. And really, this just goes to show you the dado doesn't have to be super deep to be strong. It's not like this internal grid work is going to get a lot of stress in something like a tee box. So this is only a 1/16 of an inch deep, which will give me enough room to remove more on the other side, and on this 1/4 inch board, leave me 1/8 of an inch of material in between. So let's flip it over and let me show you a different technique for the other side. Let me first just go ahead and cross cut out this piece. And I'll cut out another one. So I've got this piece that fits in nicely into this dado. So I'm going to flip it over and I want to put this other piece into the other side. For this, I'm going to use a different technique. Instead of using the knife line and everything, I'm going to cut a V groove. I'm going to cut a point on the end of this piece and a V groove on this face, and it will slot together. So for that, I need some carving gouges. How sweet it is. I'm going to use a V chisel. Specifically, a very narrow 60-degree V tool. This is a 16 sweep 6mm file V gouge. And it's important that this be a nice square edge. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot it just over here at my bench hook. I don't think I need to pull out the shooting board for this. Give myself a nice square edge. I can verify that. Nice and plumb, nice and square. Now I've got my depth set and I've got the outer walls of the dado set. So I want to grab my V gouge and just sight down the center. I'm going to start on the far edge and just trace a line down the center. I equate this to like working with a plow plane, where you work on the far edge and kind of work your way back. I find it's easier to just work in these shorter spurts until I can get the actual shape of the V established. Now I've got it all the way along the edge. Now I'm going to come in here and set the bottom of the V gouge right at my depth line. And just kind of wiggle it forward a little bit just to establish that cut. Just hand pressure and just a little bit of side-to-side wiggling, if you will. I'm taking a shaving from both sides. And you can lean the chisel kind of one way or the other to remove a little bit more off one side. I'm just trying to take it back to my dado lines. You can use a 45-degree gouge, you can use a 60-degree V gouge. I just like the slightly narrower one because I like to be able to kind of expand my V groove back to the lines instead of trying to get it all in kind of one fell swoop. So there's my V cut into the face. Now I need to make the point on the end of this that will fit. So I'll bring this piece over to my joinery bench. I just like to work a little bit higher up for this. And I've got my V gouge, got it set up right here in the vise. So essentially what I want to do is turn the gouge upside down and shave a point. So I'm looking to be taking 2 shavings, one from both sides here. And you can kind of steer that. And as I come to the end, I'm going to tilt it up and just sever those fibers all the way to the end so I don't get a whole huge amount of spelching there. If you want, you can put like a center line on the end grain to give you something to work towards. Literally for this demonstration, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I would recommend the center line. It's a lot easier to work to a center line. Maybe one more pass here. A lot of times you can really save yourself some trouble by making this piece actually wider than it needs to be. So if you do get a little bit of spelching, you can just kind of plane that down on the other face. You just smooth it up, remove any little bumps. Just letting the V-gouge shape it for you. So now I'll bring my other piece to bear with the dado, and this slots right in to that V-groove. It's really either method will work, but I find with the dado, you know, I've got a nice flat board and I've got to get, say if I'm working in a grid and I've got a board up here, I can use a shooting board to kind of dial in that length and get just a perfect gap-free fit. But with a V-groove, I can kind of rely on a friction fit. So if I had another board out here, I'll just clamp that in place, I can leave the board a little bit long and kind of rely upon the length of the board to create a friction fit as I slide that down. And you know, sometimes you actually kind of bend it into place to get it just right. And you can come back and really dial in the fit with the gouge on the other side. But this makes for an easy way to make it more knockdownable. Certainly you can do the same thing on the Dados, but because you've got this V-groove fit like this, it's easier to slot them in and out and change them out. Or if you wanted to make like an adjustable layout where you've got the grid pattern, say you're making a tool drawer, and this is exactly what I did in the tool cabinet, in my tool cabinet. Let me pull out my file drawer here. All of these dividers are interchangeable. I can slide them in and out. I've got a hole for a divider back here. I can move them around, change them around, add more in as necessary, and they just slide in and out because they're in these little V-grooves. Either way is going to work just fine for you depending upon the look that you want. You may take a little bit of practice to get the point just right. Maybe in this case you want to go with a slightly wider V-gouge so that you can kind of sneak up on that and kind of steer your way in to get just the right fit. But even if the V is not the exact same shape, you'll find that you get a really tight fit just by relying upon the compression strength of the length of the board. So either way, I've still got 1/8 of an inch of material in here, and if I were to glue it all together, it ends up forming kind of one piece. So any weakness that's left by the skinny bit in the middle is counteracted by the cross-grain pieces coming in at 90 degrees to that. So there you go. Small dados and a small grid work like something in a tea cabinet. Rob, hope that helps you out, and I hope that I was able to demonstrate it better than I could have in an audio recording with WoodTalk. That's it for me. I'll see you next week live, 9 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to talk about edge planing.